in some ways, the worry is like the outer layer of the onion, and you have to either get through it, peel it off to get to what the real issue is.
You are listening to Amplify Your Success Podcast, episode 402. And today I've got a special guest joining us, and she's going to help us get our spark back. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success Podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and business leaders. It's your host, Melanie Benson, authority amplifier to expert-based entrepreneurs ready to amplify the reach of their message in the world. And today the conversation is about getting your spark back and what to do when maybe that spark you had at one time has kind of diminished a bit. I know I've had conversations with so many entrepreneurs lately who they really need this. The summer's been tough for a lot of people. Actually, hey, this last year's been tough for a lot of people. And sometimes we just need a little boost of inspiration. We need some tools to plug back into what lights our fire, right? So our guest is going to give us some great tools around that today. And, I was thinking as that conversation with our guest today unfolded about what can happen for you when you're lit up about your message and you're fired up to get it out there in the world. It's almost like this is part of our spark, is to really understand you're on this planet to do some very powerful work. And if you can get your message dialed in, I call it having a lighthouse message. You can really get that lighthouse message dialed in, and then you amplify the reach of it, whatever that is for you, social media, video marketing, doing a podcast tour, which is my favorite, speaking on stages, hosting your own podcast. There are people out there that are just needing to hear you and your fire, your passion, your inspiration. So let's get that message lit up, my friend. And if that's not happening for you right now and you're feeling like a best kept secret, you're way too invisible in the marketplace, let's talk. I'll drop a link in the show notes for my upcoming 100K Authority Accelerator. This is my proven 12-week program, and everybody who's graduated raves about it. It's just helping people unleash their fire, and let's get your fire unleashed, my friend. So 100K Authority Accelerator starts in the fall. You don't want to miss it if you know it's time to get massive clarity and amplify the reach of your work in the world. Okay, so let's get into today's episode. Welcome back, amplifiers. I hope you are ready to get your spark back. Or if you already have a spark, let's amplify that spark and make it compelling and contagious. Let me introduce you to our amazing guest today. Her name is Rachel Martin, and Rachel believes in the power of the human spirit to overcome, to thrive, and to find deep joy. And because of that, she pours out her heart into her writing on findingjoy.net and authoring. She's authored several books. The new one is Get Your Spark Back, which we'll dip into a little bit today. She's also a founding partner in Audience Industries. It's a company that's designed to train and equip entrepreneurs in their ventures. Now, her writings have been translated into over 25 languages, which I think is so amazing. She's got a robust, engaged Facebook community when we all know Facebook communities are not necessarily robust and engaged these days. And she's had her content featured in so many amazing places like Huffington Post, The Today Show, Tiny Buddha, Pop Sugar, just to name a few. There's a very, very long list that you can check out on her bio on the show page. But Rachel, I'm so glad we're here today. And I just love the work that's coming through in this new book, Get Your Spark Back.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here today.
And I just can't imagine there being a more relevant time, right? Like if we kind of like tune into what's happening around us in the world, depending on what part of the world you're in, it's interesting timing to have this conversation about bringing your spark back. Why do you think this timing is so significant right now to the humans on this planet?
I love that question. And I believe that you're absolutely right. I think that let's go back 5 years ago, pre-COVID, and everybody was kind of on this very fast, I liken it to a fast train, especially in America. We were just going, 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 and there was no way to get off. And then all of a sudden, there was this moment when life changed. It was whether you had to work or not, there was this moment where what we perceived as normal was gone.
Mm.
And I think what that ended up doing was a lot of us had a lot of time to think. If we weren't a first responder, and I'm very, very thankful for all of them, many of us were left looking at our stories, wondering, is this even the story I signed up for? Is this my life? And then fast forward to now, a lot of us kind of got back into that busy and we're wondering about it. And I really believe that when we live with our soul alive and we have that spark, that part of us burning brightly like who we were supposed to be, we bring a lot of light to the world. And when you look at media and when you look at the world, you see a lot of really, really hard and awful stuff. And we need people who are in line with their soul and that can bring light. And the only way to do that is to stop denying yourself and to say, you know what, I got to start listening. I have to start taking care of myself. And when we do that, we actually become beacons of light for everybody else.
Mm. Yeah, I love that beacon of light. I often use the metaphor of a lighthouse. I
Mm-hmm.
know the people in my community, the people that I serve and work with their messaging and their visibility strategy, it's like they're a lighthouse. But sometimes their light is dimmed, right? And so people
Right.
can't see them. They're not being the way shore that they're meant to be. And I think that's why I'm really resonating with this idea of getting our spark back, because sometimes the world around us dims that light, and sometimes it's our own like story we make up about it. We're like dimming our own light, right? And I
Right.
I saw somewhere on your materials this quote that I have shared this quote so many times in the last 30 years, and I really have you taken this one to heart, that sometimes you have
Mm-hmm.
to let go of the picture of what you thought your life was supposed to look like and
Mm-hmm.
learn to find the joy, or learn to like really value
Mm-hmm.
the life that you're living in. And
Right.
I know how this has played out for me, but I want to hear for you first, and if we have time I might share a little bit of mine. But how has that played out in your life?
Well, I tell people all the time, nobody in their yearbook, probably, if I could go back 30 some years ago, nobody puts in there, it'd be really fun is when I'm 40, I'm going to go through a divorce. That'd be a great life goal. Or I'm going to deal with all this. And then we all have these stories. We all have these moments where our life doesn't look like anything of what our younger selves thought. And sometimes it doesn't look like what we thought even 3 years ago. And what ends up happening is there's this, it's this crossroads place where you've got this story, this life that's kind of a bit messy. And for me, it was like, how do I reconcile everything that's happened? And how do I cling? And how do I go in with everything with what I have in front of me? And it really was about the process of, for me, going all in. What does it take to give give this rest of my story the best shot that I can, and to find joy? And for me as a writer, finding joy, that whole concept has been part of my own soul's identity for the last 15 years. People have asked me, well, what does it mean? And joy to me is this act of looking for something good or powerful or positive in a life and in a day that might not be perfect. And that discipline of looking for joy has really helped propel me forward and has really helped nurture that spark in my own life.
Mm, that's beautiful. Yeah, I definitely, this moves me a lot, this concept of letting go of the
Hmm.
picture you thought your life should be like. And I think this happens in business. I know I personally I had a vision of what my business would look like in the early days in 2001, 2002. I achieved that.
Right.
And then it didn't look like that anymore. And I went through space of grieving it. I went through a process of resenting that it didn't look that way anymore. And then one day I started to realize, like, okay, I'm being held hostage in an identity and a version of me that I don't even
Right,
want to be. And so I really had to lean into look at, like, okay, so the life that I created, the life that I live, the business that I have, there are so many beautiful things that people would die to have. Like, they're just so
right.
craving what I have. And I think sometimes we have to change that story.
We do, and that the perspective, I love that you recognize that there was a part of you keeping you held hostage. I mean, I talk about that in my own story, and mine was it is I give this example of these green shorts that I used to have, and that they were like this actual symbol that was kind of holding me back. They were green shorts that I used to wear when I went through my divorce about 10 years ago, and I was struggling. I mean, I was working like crazy back then. And then fast forward to the future, and all of a sudden these green shorts didn't fit me. And I was like, well, I wanted them to, and yet they were holding me hostage. And when I think back to that, I wouldn't want to be in that spot anymore. And I talk a lot about that, about sometimes you have to like look at these things that are like, you know what? That was me then, and I don't need to carry it with me now. It's not a definer of who I am now. And am I grateful for the me that went through that, that fit into those shorts, that was at that spot? Absolutely, because she was unbelievably brave and unbelievably courageous, because she was the one that got me to this point. But do I want to have some of those limitations anymore? No. And so for me, it meant being willing to let it go, let that part of me go, and realize I am way stronger now and stepping into who I'm supposed to be.
I love that. When you're talking about your green shorts, for me, it was my white cachet pants.
Really, it's we all have
I loved
these.
those pants.
Yes.
It's so funny. We all have
Uh,
something.
we do. We do.
Let's talk a little bit about worry and anxiety.
Okay.
Because I think, because, and I'm sure that this is wrapped up in we're living, we've moved beyond a life that we thought we were going to have, or maybe our spark is dim, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of worry and anxiety and angst taking up space in our mind. And I saw you had a blog post about reframing worry.
Hmm.
Let's say you're talking to somebody who's maybe they're listening in right now, and their mind has been clouded with worry and angst and anxiety. What would give them some advice, or how would they reframe that into something that would help them claim that spark again?
Well, first of all, I would want them to know. I want you to know you're not alone. Like, that's the thing with worry or anxiety is it can be this isolating spot where we think, oh, I'm the only one worrying about this, or I'm the only one dealing with anxiety, or and that can keep that cycle going of it. The second thing is I really believe that sometimes we're given the negative, like we're told stop worrying right now, stop being anxious. And we're told it's this one time thing. And I have taught myself this. I just talked with a daughter about this, that sometimes I'm like, I'm going to set the timer. I'm going to let myself worry through it all for 10 minutes. And I am diligent about when that timer stops. I'm going to stop. And I'll tell myself, if you need to worry about it again tomorrow, you can. Because what ends up happening is worry just creates this loop. It's a loop over and over and over again that there's no solution. And at a certain point, I've realized I have to be diligent about telling myself, you need to stop, you need to come up with a solution, and you need to be willing to set it down. And as a historically chronic worrier, that has taken a lot of discipline. And the last thing is generally, like, if I'm a mom, I worry about something because I love my kids. And I always try to look at it that way. Like, it's not like I'm just going to be worrying about something for nothing. So, what is the real root of it? What's the reason? What am I actually looking at? What do I actually need to solve? Because in some ways, the worry is like the outer layer of the onion, and you have to either get through it, peel it off to get to what the real issue is.
Mm, yeah, I like that onion analogy. And I think we both recognize that sometimes there's nothing to do. You can't
Right.
do anything about what you're worried about.
Right, right. I know that. I give an example sometimes like of years ago, in my first marriage, the IRS was they were not my friend. Like I would get all these notices. And so the postal service has that informed delivery, which is a blessing and a curse. But if you're a worrier and you're on vacation and you see a letter from the IRS, for me, it was like an instant trigger back to 10 years ago. And I was like going through all these scenarios. I mean, I had to actually stop myself and think, what rabbit trail are you? I am worrying about something that's not even happening yet. And long story short, I open it up and it says, thank you for using the online IRS tool. But it really was this powerful example of I wasted, honestly, and I could have wasted more, a lot of time thinking about hypotheticals that never were. And so I've learned to take the worry and almost put it on the shelf until I know what is the actual thing that I need to worry about. And I give a lot of that credit to my husband Dan. Is He'll be like, you're worrying about an unknown. You're trying to solve a problem that doesn't even exist. Let's wait till we actually know what it is. And finding out that, thanks for using the online tool, there's no problem.
Yeah. I always go back to this quote, like, worry makes your worst fears permanent.
Oh,
We're
that's
worrying
powerful.
things into existence. And first of all, if you believe in, vibrational attunement, and you
Yep.
recognize that worry is a very low vibration, we are just going to make
Yep.
decisions and hit those upper limits and things. But it definitely is a lot of wasted mind space when you're worrying about things that haven't come to light, and we can't
Yeah.
control them anyway. So we might as well focus on, well, okay, so what can I do today to spark some joy? And so let's talk
Right.
about that. Let's talk about some practical things that somebody could do before they get your book, obviously, that would spark joy right now, no matter what's going on in their life.
Well, you have to be intentional about it. And I like that you said that vibrational attunement, because I remember I've seen the chart, and I remember somebody learning one time, somebody said, what's the next best emotion you can choose? And
Mm,
that has been a powerful tool for me because joy is it's quite high on that. And we don't give ourselves the grace to choose the next. What is the next most empowered choice I can make? What is the next most empowered feeling I can move into, or emotion? And if you're looking for joy, part of it is being willing to give yourself grace for the times in your past where you messed up, or grace for the times when you don't have the answers, and grace for that kind of uncomfortable space, because it is an uncomfortable space when you're giving up worry or giving up anxiety or working on moving through those emotions. You're left in this new spot, and it takes a lot of grace to know that, okay, I'm trying. And it's always the two-step forward, one step back, that whole process. And if you're eventually you keep taking the steps, you'll get somewhere far. I've told people all the time, like, if you one every single day of small decisions, which we all know, after a year, it's monumental change. And so finding joy is being willing to celebrate the small. And it's also being willing to, I call it, and I've heard it other places too, the pause. I've been very, very diligent in the last year or two about stopping what I'm doing and just clearing whatever is going on in my mind and being willing to set it down. And because otherwise, let's say with our interview, if I'm just rushing full speed, like on that train, and I'm coming in, I'm carrying everything else in with me. And I really think there's power in taking a moment, catching my breath, and then deciding to come in at my best authentic self.
yeah, I use the pause button a lot.
Yes, yes,
Usually because when I'm frustrated, I am not my best self. So I can say and do things that I don't like,
right,
coming from me, from that automatic, like, get the frustration resolved. And I think that
right.
pause process is a way that so many of us could use that more right now, before we assume something, before we take action on something that we may not be in our best selves, and we proliferate
Yes.
those negative vibrations in the world. Like, I think now is a time where many of us need to look at, like, how can I be a spark of light rather
Right.
than a reinforcement of divisiveness, negativity, and drama, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have been an advocate for running a very large Facebook page has made me feel quite responsible for the footprint that I leave on this world. And I will not tolerate any divisiveness or anger or any of that on that page. And one of the things I remind people of in a very loving, but very, this is the way it is tone, is that on the other side of that screen is a very real person that has a family, probably a family, a heart, emotions, and what we think might get translated might not be translated that way. So a lot of times it's like taking that pause, that step back. And then the other thing I want the social media place, or at least where my place is, that instead of it being this power over strategy, this is the only way, that I found the best way for people to get their spark back or to be a light is to come underneath and support people and say, we can all sit at this table and have a conversation. Doesn't mean we have to agree, but we can love the other person sitting across from us because that person matters just like we matter.
I love that. I love that, Rachel, so much. And I think that's exactly what many people crave right now is a safe place to let
Mm-hmm.
their spark be ignited again. Because when they
Yes.
don't feel safe, they're going to stay safe and small.
Yeah, they will. You'll stay small. I remember as a little girl growing up learning that This Little Light of Mine song, and one of the things was hide it under a bushel
Mm.
basket, like, and I realized that's what so many of us do. And sometimes we stay small because we're afraid of, well, who do other people think we are? But we live in such a world where it's so instant because of the internet for an instant critic to be there. And there can't be progress or change or dialogue if we're all kind of cowering there. And we really need spaces where that we're willing to have the conversation, where we're willing to say, listen, I don't understand, but I want to hear more. I want to understand. I want to have this honest dialogue with you. And to me, that's where these sparks of light can ignite. And if you go back to my upbringing too, that when there's no darkness where there's light. And we need light in this world. We need truth tellers. We need people that are willing to speak real and honest and be that person that extends the hand and helps somebody else out.
Mm. I love that. As just this quote was coming through, like, seek to understand, not to necessarily to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
Just flipping our mental framework. There is a place to be understood, but first you have to understand.
Right.
It's like, oh my God, we
I,
could have a whole conversation
we
about
could, we
relationships.
could, we could, we could. I'm going to tell you, I think part of it comes from having adult children, is
Hmm.
because their viewpoint is very different. And I remember a day sitting out on our deck talking, and I said, you know what? I just want to understand. I need you to talk to me like we're really good friends. And that moment, it was like this softening of everything. And so I'm very passionate about that.
It's interesting you say that. I think I'm a stepmom of
Hmm.
two young adults,
Hmm.
and I've always just seek to understand. That was
Hmm.
my motto with them because I wanted to heal, a lifetime of disconnect with
Yeah.
the step parent thing. So that was huge.
Oh,
Okay,
well, we could talk for hours about
we
that too.
could.
So yeah.
We've talked so much about different pieces of finding your spark. I
Hmm.
want people to know how they can get the new book. Where can they go?
All right. Well, you can get it on my website, findingjoy.net, but it's also on Amazon and Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, and your local independent bookstore. So
Hmm.
any of those choices are good.
And we will link that up in the show notes for
Thank
you
you.
so that you can quickly find it as you're listening in. I love to end our conversations with some fun questions for people to get to know you a little bit more.
Okay.
Um, I think being in business,
Mhm.
whatever form of business we're in, is one of the boldest decisions we make as a human being.
Mhm.
What would you say is the boldest decision you ever made in business that ended up amplifying your impact and your income?
Uh, it's gonna seem small, but it was the day that I decided to give Facebook a try. It
Oh,
was well before I was a very early adopter of the Facebook page, and I actually hard coded in the Facebook like button onto my website. But my very, very first Facebook post was, which is perfect, and I had no idea, was I guess I'm going to give this Facebook thing a try. And lo and behold, that changed my whole life.
mm. Tell me more. I'm so curious because I was a relatively early adopter as well.
Mhm.
And you're talking about the page, not your personal profile.
Yep, my
What
my
is
Finding Joy page, yep.
Yeah, what is the biggest thing that happened by you being active on Facebook on the page?
Well, the page grew. Now it's got almost 1.1 million people. But what
Wow.
it did was it created a community. And I've always, always been a so the Facebook page also grew. It's all organic, which for business people are like, what? And I've always gone to the main source of what Facebook says that they're doing. And because over the last decade, you'll hear Facebook is dead, Facebook organic reach, it's nowhere. And I always would say, well, somebody's writing that article and they're getting a lot of traffic to to their very article on Facebook that's saying it's dead. They're disproving their own thing at that point. But I would always read it and I would decide, you know what, I'm just going to figure out how to make whatever algorithm change they did work versus decide they don't want me to publish here because that would be foolish.
Mm.
Facebook needs us to publish there. And so now, fast forward 10 years, 12 years later, and Facebook pays me to publish. So I'm so grateful I decided to stick it out.
I love that story so much. Again, it's about reframing what's
Mhm.
possible, right? We can
It
focus on
is.
the limitations or we can focus on where the possibility is and decide to become the version of ourselves that makes that experience successful. It's
Right.
all an internal game at that point. That's such a powerful example. Thank you. I get very excited when I hear
That's
people
so fun.
sharing that. All right, last question.
Okay.
As you look back from today to the
Mhm.
beginning, there's something I'm sure that you did at some point where you're like, "God, I wish I would have done that sooner because now I know that decision was a catapulter." What was that?
Oh, boy, I'm wondering. Now I have to think. Delegate. It would
Yeah.
be delegate. I mean, you
Okay.
probably hear that all the time as a
It's a
business
common one,
owner.
yes.
It is, but I'm going to tell you that what you probably always hear is you can't scale if it's just yourself, because you can't do everything perfectly. And I've learned to delegate, not only delegate, but trust the delegation, trust the process. I once heard a man who worked with Steve Jobs talk about the whole process, and he told fascinating stories. But the one thing he told that stood out to me the most was he said one time Steve came in to ask him about whatever he was doing, and he thought to explain to Steve everything he was doing. And I guess Steve Jobs said, "I didn't hire you to explain to me how to do it. I just hired you to get it done." And I have learned in part of delegating, it means trusting the person to do what they need to do.
Yeah. There's such a good share. And I would agree. I could never build the business I have or had if I
Right.
hadn't delegated. And it's trust. You got to trust the process, but for sure.
It is. It's
It's a lot of
trust.
trust.
It
Yeah.
is.
Rachel, thank you so much. I'm so excited for your book to be out in the world. Thank you for sharing it with the Amplify community. As you're listening in today, again, go get Rachel's new book. You can go to Amazon or we'll link up her book page in the show notes. And if you want to help be a light in the world and help more people ignite that spark, comment below wherever you're listening to this, what your spark is about.
Mhm.
Share this episode so that other people can activate their spark too. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. Be sure to join us right now in the Amplify Your Authority community at authorityamplifiers.com, and I'll share my 7 proven tips to be a highly paid expert that stands out in a crowded market. Plus, we're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.